Hey everyone, welcome to the Emotive Mind podcast where I, your host, Autumn, talk all things mental health, relationships, manifesting and spirituality, self-love, and owning a small business, Kello Collective. On this podcast, I will offer advice and motivation to you on navigating the ups and downs of life, anxiety, personal growth, and finding your true self through sharing my own journey with you. If you're anything like me and have experienced intense anxiety and mental health issues, or maybe feel stuck at where you're at in life, then I'm so glad that you found me here on the Emotive Mind podcast, where together we can transform our lives and create a motive mind. Make sure to connect with me by liking, following, subscribing, and sharing the Emotive Mind podcast on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, and Spotify at Emotive Mind Podcast. There, you can find the video recordings of each episode, the posting schedule, which new episodes come out every Tuesday, or share your thoughts and comments on your personal journey, the podcast, or whatever you would like to hear me talk about next. I would also be extremely grateful for you to check out and support this podcast through my small business, Kello Collective, hand-poured coconut soy candles and products, which you can find on Instagram, YouTube, Facebook, and TikTok at Kello Collective, and shop on kellocollective.com. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for your continued love and support on this podcast and my business. Be sure to check out any previous episodes that you may have missed, but I hope you enjoyed this episode. On the last episode, we talked about feeling stuck in life, COVID, trying to start a cosmetic business during the pandemic, and the crippling anxiety that started to ramp up. I also provided some advice to you on how to get out of a stuck period in your life. On this episode, we're going to talk about the worst panic attack that I've ever had in my life, starting therapy again, and how I pulled myself out of a long period of depersonalization. So after dropping out of the real estate program that I was in, I decided to just go ahead and take some time to focus on the job that I was in and trying to find ways to distract myself from the anxiety because I really didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. I always knew that I wanted to move away to a different state, so I was hoping that 2021 would bring that new opportunity to me, but life was not lining up to show me that that could be my new reality. I was still creating makeup looks to post on social media and used makeup as my therapy. That was my outlet for my anxiety, but I no longer wanted to restart the process of creating my cosmetic business, so I decided to kind of toss that dream to the side and thought that maybe I could potentially work on social media just as a beauty influencer or, I don't know, reviewing makeup products, something. So I also focused on just gaining product knowledge and learning different things about makeup to try and help me go into that career. When 2021 started, I was still deep in my social anxiety and depersonalization and panic attacks. So working in person became extremely hard to do. From the time that I stepped out of the door to go to work to the time I got back home after work, I was in panic. I remember that I used to hide in the bathroom and the stock room at my job a lot throughout my shift because I was so panicky and nervous talking to customers or being in a public place, worried that something crazy could happen, and just feeling so overwhelmed like I was trapped in the building. I would experience dizziness, shortness of breath, fast heartbeat, tense and tingling body sensations, and strong depersonalization that made me feel like my head was in a cloud. It brought out a lot of health anxiety and fear of passing out, having a heart attack, or just falling out on the floor when talking to a customer. I think that there was also a fear of judgment and pressure to know that when I'm talking to customers about the makeup products, I have to know, what I'm talking about and be present in the moment. So it just feels very nerve-wracking that if you say something wrong, they might look at you crazy. I felt like I needed to be present in the moment. And that really just gave me anxiety because that anxiety made me feel like I wasn't present in the moment, which caused more depersonalization, and pulled me further away from that moment. It was a cycle that I experienced at work or at home, talking to family and friends, watching TV. It really didn't matter what I was doing, I felt that way. I remember having a full-blown panic attack at work and just crying my eyes out because I wanted to work from home and get out of the environment that I was in, but I obviously couldn't just up and quit my job because I had to make money, so that made my mental health so much worse. After a panic attack like this, I remained in a tense, shaky, bad mood the remainder of my shift, or if I was at home, I remained in this feeling for hours until I could be alone and just relax in my room. Something I feel like isn't talked about enough is the time that it takes you to come down from your panic attack. When I would go home from work, I still felt so uptight and paranoid and on edge and like I needed to be alone. The symptoms lingered for a while afterwards, and I literally had to just go down a couple levels to finally relax hours later. Your body and your mind need to take that time because it was so exhausting and draining for your body to go through that panic attack and everything that you experienced. I had had several smaller panic attacks like the one at work very frequently, but the worst one that I ever had in my life was when I went on a short vacation with my friend and their family in May of 2021. While we were on vacation, my anxiety was quickly increasing every time we went out to a store, a restaurant, or somewhere new that I've never been before. But this particular night, we all got dressed up to go to dinner and celebrate my friend's birthday. And once we got to the restaurant, it was extremely crowded. As you can imagine, this of course triggered my social anxiety so bad. It was so loud and busy in there. I felt extremely overstimulated to the point that when I sat down at the table, I couldn't even think straight enough to order a drink and food. I tried telling the people that I was with that I was very anxious and kind of what I was experiencing, and they tried to talk it out with me and kind of see what the cause was, but honestly, all it did was make me even more anxious. It put even more focus on my anxiety attack that was building slowly and made me feel embarrassed and stressed out. I felt like I was being ridiculous, even though I just wanted to run out of the restaurant and I knew that I had to suck it up for the sake of them having a good time. It, to be honest, makes you feel like a burden when you're the only one messed up in your head in the moment and everyone else is so positive and having a good time. But I barely ended up even eating the food that I ordered, and I sat there the entire time squeezing my hand and chugging water because I was so paranoid and slipping away into the depersonalization cloud feeling. It felt so stuffy in there. It was like the walls were closing in on me and I was trapped. I felt that way the entire time I was there until finally we left and went back to the resort. When we got back there, I finally calmed down just a little bit, but the remaining effects of the anxiety attack still lingered. Now, this wasn't near as bad as what was about to happen a few hours later. My friend and I went out for ice cream later that night, and I hoped that that would help me calm down and, do something fun to kind of get my mind off of things. But once we got into the ice cream shop, the depersonalization, tense body, and nervousness started up again. We got our ice cream and sat in the car, but my mind was racing with obsessive thoughts, and I just didn't feel present in the moment after all of the other sensations that I was feeling. Something crazy about depersonalization is that it can literally convince you that you cannot taste the flavors of the food or drink in that moment. I remember feeling so panicky over not being able to taste my food. Like, I could taste it, but I couldn't. My mind told me that I wasn't tasting the flavors, and it made no sense to me. It was really freaky, but I now know that that was completely made up in my mind, and it was a lie that my anxiety and mind were telling me. But while we were sitting in the car, My best friend was obviously noticing that something was wrong with me and that I was quiet and distant and just eating slow, picking at my food. And so they asked what was going on. I was always so hesitant to admit what I was feeling, but I told him anyways. Then he got upset with me and instantly turned on the car and started driving back to the resort. This made me feel like shit personally because I felt like I was a bother and a burden that, he couldn't even go out with me and get ice cream without me having a mental health issue and an anxiety attack. I felt ridiculous again. It was very frustrating. This now added even more anxiety, sadness, and panic on top of what I was already feeling. We sat in silence the rest of the way to the resort, but I was on the verge of tears the entire time. I was so mad at myself for being so effed up in the head that I thought I ruined their birthday trip. Aside from that, the road that we were driving on was so small. It was a 2-lane road with barely any street lights and just trees covering both sides. So it was like a dark, never-ending straight path that seemed to just close in on me. I started to get tunnel vision on the road we were on, and the pitch blackness made me so uneasy and uncomfortable, like everything was getting narrow and tight. It sent me into the start of the worst depersonalization episode and panic attack of my life. My chest started getting tight, my breathing got faster and heavier, I had chest pains and wanted to burst out into tears. I was gripping my jacket and I felt like I was about to pass out. I sat there in the passenger seat in silence while experiencing all of those thoughts and symptoms. The saddest and hardest thing that others don't realize is that you could be in the middle of one of the worst panic attacks of your life and you're just sitting there, what to them is calm and quiet and just staring off into space, but they have no clue that you're sitting there freaking out and experiencing so many different sensations and thoughts in that moment. As soon as we pulled up into the resort, I jumped out of the car, dizzy and slightly disoriented, and booked it to the room because I was not having it. I just wanted to be alone and away from everybody. He opened the door to the hotel room and I ran to the bathroom so fast that he didn't even know what was happening or where I went. But I got into the bathroom, shut the door, locked it, ripped off my jacket, and slammed my hands onto the counter and looked in the mirror. I felt so disconnected from my body. I genuinely thought that I was in a dream and not alive. Nothing felt real. I felt like my soul was in a cloud being taken away from my body because nothing I told myself could bring me back down into the present moment. When I looked at myself, I didn't know who I was looking at. It felt like my voice in my head was telling me, Autumn, it's you. You're staring at yourself. You're here in your body. It's okay. But my mind told me that I was looking at a stranger and that I didn't know what was happening or who this was looking at me. I legit thought that I was losing my mind. Actually, I thought that I was going to have to go and be put into a facility because this was one of the most terrifying feelings that I can't even put into words for you. My thoughts were spiraling out of control and I just kept touching my arms and my face and trying to figure out if this was me. It was so crazy because even though I knew I was touching my arm and my face, it didn't feel like it. It feels like when you're in a dream and you don't actually feel what's happening, but you know what's happening. It was insane. I put my face right up to the mirror and I just froze because I felt so far gone mentally in that moment that I was like, this is it. I am never going to come back from this. There was so much terror that ran through my body and my mind. The adrenaline and fear was unlike anything that I'd ever experienced. This was actually one of the top scariest moments in my entire life. I heard my best friend knocking on the door asking if I was okay, and I was just like, yeah, I am, everything's cool. Even though I felt like life didn't feel real, I didn't feel real. The thing that came from this panic attack was that I had trouble looking into the mirror for years because I felt like I wasn't looking at my real self. It made me extremely uncomfortable and put me in an instant clouded mental state because it took me right back to that moment. But after standing in the bathroom for what felt like forever, I eventually went out of the bathroom and lay down in bed and just cried my eyes out because a switch just flipped and I officially thought that this was going to be my life forever. There was no going back to life before this anxiety and the depersonalization symptom and panic attacks. I immediately started researching therapists in my city so that I could make an appointment when I got back home because I had to figure something out before I was swallowed in my mind. At some point, my body was so exhausted from this massive panic attack that I started to semi-calm down, but the feeling of being in a cloud, the body aches, tight chest, and sadness remained. Going to sleep was also scary because dreaming just felt like a continuation of your daily life when you're awake. That's what depersonalization makes you feel like. Like you aren't even consciously aware of what's happening when you wake up. And it was all my mind convincing me the entire time, but I just didn't know at that time. The next day, I emailed a few therapists to see who was able to see me the soonest, and in the meantime, I decided I had to make a change and figure out other alternative methods to try and help me with this anxiety and this big depersonalization symptom. So I began looking for a podcast or book, journal, anything that could give me some knowledge and help to kind of bring myself down from all the anxiety. So the clouded mental feeling that I was in, honestly, it was so scary and so bad from that panic attack that it kept me in that mental state for an entire week afterwards. Going to work, watching TV, talking, driving, watching a funny video. It didn't matter what I did. I just could not pull myself out of this mental state. I felt like I was in a simulation, just going through the motions like a robot on autopilot. And of course, I was consciously aware of what I was doing, but my mind put a fuzzy layer over the feelings and the consciousness to make me think that I was in a dream. This panic attack and a week long of depersonalization ended up actually being a blessing for me because I see now that God had me experience this to finally take the steps necessary to begin healing from my anxiety and traumas. He needed me to get serious with myself and seek help because doors were going to be opening for me later on in the year. I don't know about you, but I need a candle break to relax. So I'm going to take a second and light my sugared vanilla Kello Collective candle, which you can find on kellocollective.com. This candle is a sugary sweet blend of vanilla, raspberry, bergamot, orange, and soft musk. Okay, now that I have some decadent sweet aromas in the room, let's get into the second half of this episode. Within the week-long depersonalization episode I was in, I came across an anxiety podcast, book, and journal that I got from Amazon, and I started to listen to the podcast at night before bed, reading the book throughout the day or at night as well, and journaling daily to see if I noticed any patterns in my mental state and anxiety symptoms. The podcast and the book that I was reading were educational sources of anxiety that were very beneficial for me because it also explained a lot about the health anxiety that I was going through and how to start shifting my mind to realize that my mind is actually the thing that is working with my anxiety to make me believe the lies that it was telling me. After getting through a few podcast episodes and chapters of the book, I started to slowly feel a little better like a week later. And honestly, I was so relieved to hear someone talk about the symptoms I was experiencing, including the depersonalization, because for the first time in a very long time, I was thinking that I actually wasn't going crazy. I wasn't alone in experiencing this, and I wasn't going to live like this forever. I started gaining hope that although this was going to be a very long road ahead for me to heal and get to a happy, peaceful, and free mind, It wasn't impossible, and I was capable of achieving that. I had felt hopeless for so long that it was so refreshing to hear words of encouragement and knowledge on anxiety because no one else around me really opened up about their mental health. So I really didn't know much about what I was experiencing because no one talked to me about it. I had felt like such an inconvenience to those around me, and I didn't feel like I was taken seriously. There were countless times that I was so disregarded and just kind of shoved to the side and told that I had nothing to be anxious over. But now I was listening to this new podcast and hearing someone tell me how valid my feelings were and how the mind works to create this anxiety. Journaling was also a huge piece of my anxiety healing at this time because it felt so nice to be able to put my thoughts onto paper and pour my heart out, but also giving me a purpose to have something to actually complete every day and hold me accountable. It kept me accountable and healing because it ensured that I was taking the time out of my day to listen to the podcast, read the book, journal how my day was, and really focus on the healing with my anxiety. I cannot express how helpful an anxiety journal can be for you. It was only a $10 journal from Amazon that had multiple sections to fill out daily, like how you're feeling, what's on your mind, what positive things happened throughout the day, what negative things, what you're grateful for, and more. It really helped me to dissect my day and my thoughts and also find happy things in the midst of a very difficult and dark time. This is also a time when I got deeper into my faith and closer to God and started to look for different little things to be grateful for every day. I think gratitude is such an important piece of this and something that you should start practicing because I tell you what, it will significantly help your mind and keep you kind of focused on some more positive things because your mind can definitely send you down a rabbit hole and make you think that your life is so bad and will catastrophize all different things. So definitely practice some gratitude and find some simple things that you're grateful for, even like your house, I don't know, your bottled water. It doesn't matter, honestly, family, friends, God, just find some things to be grateful for and focus on that. But after a few weeks after the major panic attack that I had, I decided to, like I said, go to therapy. So got in contact with a therapist and I was researching different types of therapies and different methods. So I ended up coming across EMDR therapy. Now, EMDR therapy is essentially where you move your eyes in a certain way, like side to side, to try and reprocess a memory. So you sit there and you're going over your traumatic memory and trying to reprocess it while the therapist is sitting there with their finger going back and forth. You try to retrain your brain to view the memories in a different, not so traumatic way, and sometimes create a different outcome in your head that you wish would have happened to kind of give it a more positive and powerful twist to help you heal. I had tried cognitive behavioral therapy before, which is more of a talking-based therapy, but I just didn't mesh well with the therapist at that time. So I figured this time around, let's go ahead and try a different method with a new therapist to see if this could work out better for me. I suggest that you research different types of therapy methods and therapists to find the one that best fits for you and your healing, but it may take some trial and error to determine the best method and therapist for you. But EMDR therapy was kind of weird to me because if I'm being honest, if you've ever seen someone get hypnotized, that's kind of what it looks like without you actually going into a trance. The therapist would move her hands left and right in front of my eyes while I would have to think of a traumatic memory. Then I would tell her how I felt in that moment, and she'd move her hands back and forth again while I would think of a new positive way to try and redo that memory. While it was helpful to bring up some memories and make different connections to some of these symptoms of my anxiety, I didn't really notice a major decrease in my anxiety or feel like I was getting to the root of my issues, but I kept at it for a few months along with the podcast, book, and journal. One thing that was helpful for me in this therapy was finding a happy place. For me, it was under the palm trees and the sunshine and feeling the breeze blowing and feeling free and happy. And something that you need to do if you want to find your happy place is to focus on like the five senses. So, for me, it was thinking about feeling the breeze on your skin or feeling the sun beat down on you, seeing the palm trees, thinking about how happy it makes you, just really immersing yourself in that experience of what you wish, you could be at that moment. So I use this a lot in times that I felt very anxious or like a panic attack was brewing. I would try and center my mind with the thoughts of being in the state that I always wanted to be in, under the palms, instead of in the depressing state that I currently lived in. At this point, I was really getting determined to conquer this anxiety, so I started to learn different techniques to help myself calm down, like putting your hand on your stomach and focusing your breathing down to your diaphragm instead of your chest. This helps in the moments when you're getting very worked up and start breathing heavy or have tightness in your chest. This helps in those moments when you're getting very worked up and start breathing heavy or having tightness in your chest. When your breathing gets more shallow and it feels like you can't breathe, take a moment to just close your eyes and focus on breathing in your diaphragm. Take a few slow, deep breaths, inhaling and exhaling. And notice how your breathing will start to calm down and you can become a little more normal and regulated again in terms of your breathing. I also started practicing taking conscious full breaths, but this was way harder than I expected because you are so worked up that trying to force yourself to count and stretch out your breathing was very abnormal at first and makes you almost feel like you can't breathe even more because you kind of start hyperventilating. It's like you're focusing so hard on that, but with practice, it can help calm your nerves as well. If I was in the car driving and felt an anxiety attack start to build or my mind racing with anxious, obsessive thoughts, I would turn on my favorite songs and sing them to try and keep myself more present in the moment and control my breathing. These are just a few major changes that help me daily, and over the next few months, I started to notice a little more of positive changes in my anxiety and my mind, which was a relief. If you're in the beginning of your anxiety healing journey or have had multiple dead ends and trying to heal from this, please try seeking different methods to educate yourself on anxiety, try journaling, and start to dig deep for the root causes. Even if you're not in therapy, you can still do the inner shadow work on your own. The podcast that I listened to not only helped me discover more insightful information and knowledge on anxiety, but gave me a goal to most importantly heal myself and work to live a fulfilling, happy life. It made me feel like I did not have to suffer. I feel like you keep yourself in this mind state of just being addicted to suffering, but that's not okay. That's not how you should live your life because you're going to keep yourself in that mental state. Even if you don't feel like it's addicting, your subconscious and everything is addicted to feeling that way because that's just how you know to feel. But having the outlet to kind of gain the knowledge and hear different, stories of people who have experienced the same thing were very helpful. So I recommend you doing the same. Of course, I'm here to share my story, but it really helps to feel like you're not alone when you hear what other people went through. But this really ended up actually leading me to discover that one day I wanted to be able to have an outlet to express myself and share some knowledge and my experience with others to help them, just like this podcast helped really save me in a way. I talked in the last episode about God planting seeds in your life to show you what's to come. And in that moment, a seed was planted for me by God to show me that I was supposed to create a podcast one day. And this is why I speak so heavily on trusting the way that your life unfolds and stop looking at your current conditions in your life in such a bad, negative way and look at it from the perspective of what lessons or growth do I need to learn from this, or what is the season of life trying to show me and have me experience. To think that 2 years later, I would have this podcast to be able to share my journey with you and some insight and advice and motivation, that seems so unattainable to me back then. I thought it was going to take years and years and years to even get to that point. But this is such an accomplishment to me. You need to also be able to recognize how far you've come and give yourself credit and be patient with yourself, but look back on your life and be like, wow, look at where I was and look at where I'm at now. Look at those small changes that I made. It takes a lot of courage and strength to be able to really take the steps and go through all of this to heal, but it is so worth it. And you need to be proud of yourself and recognize the accomplishments that you have made to be able to get further in your healing. Now, I say all this to try and give you some hope, because when you think that you're destined for failure or going to be stuck in this part of your life and between a rock and a hard place for your entire life, I promise that your life will change for the better. And when you make the determined decision to do better for yourself, turn to God and do the inner and outer work, your life really can be so, so, so beautiful. Have faith that the hard times will pass and you will make your life so fulfilling and peaceful and have some really, really amazing and loving best days on earth. But back in 2021, after I started therapy, I was still experiencing the panic attacks and depersonalization. I didn't have a clear direction that I wanted to go with my life, but I tried my best to look for a career to get into, continue therapy, and work on my healing. But I also prayed for the opportunity to move away to a different state that I always wanted to live in, which is where my story continues to unfold in 2021 and take a few unexpected, mind-blowing turns that showed me that God had such bigger plans in store for me. I'll see you back here next Tuesday, where we will dive into more signs from the above, angels and God and universe and everyone that showed me where my life was going to go, but also almost blacking out in a TJ Maxx. That's a crazy story, some food anxiety, and the most life-changing blessing that changed the course of my life. Thank you guys so very much for listening to the end of this podcast episode. I truly hope that you enjoyed it, and make sure to check out any previous Emotive Mind podcast episodes that you may have missed before this one. And if you would like to check out the video recordings of this episode and every other Emotive Mind podcast episode, make sure to head on over to YouTube at Emotive Mind Podcast to watch the recordings. And while you're there on YouTube, please make sure to subscribe and turn on your post notifications so that you don't miss the new episodes that drop every Tuesday on YouTube and Spotify. You can also get social with me on the Emotive Mind Podcast on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, and Spotify at Emotive Mind Podcast. And I would love for you to check out and support the podcast through my small business, Kello Collective, hand-poured coconut soy candles and products on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, and TikTok. And you can shop the candles on kellocollective.com. Well, that's all for today. I will see you guys here next Tuesday, where together we will create a motive mind. See you on the next episode. Bye.